Hello everyone, my name is Beckett and welcome back to the channel. And today in Division 2 we are going to be breaking down another build video and we're going to be looking at turret builds again. A lot has changed with this season with the capacitor, waveform, and different things coming into play, as well as the new brand set. We can do a lot more than we ever could with the turret build and they feel really good. It's not just boring, you know, make sure you keep your instinct buff up. We can actually do some insane amount of damage and it's very fun to play with, and I've been having quite a bit of fun with it. But before we get started, if you enjoy the content, hit that subscribe, and if you like the video, smash that like button. Now, as for playstyles, this is a very passive playstyle, but you can be slightly aggressive with it sometimes, but generally not always, depending on what content you can do. And this build is set up to do any amount of content other than the raid, just because the way skill builds are set up and the scaling, it just doesn't work. But I've been using this in legendary, my checkpoint farming, activity farming, heroic random missions. There's really nothing this build can't do. Now, as for our main focus, it's mostly going to be make sure we have our turrets down at all time and make sure they are focusing the right targets, because if you don't know, sometimes the striker drone just like I don't want to work today and he goes and clocks out for a break. So just make sure they are focusing the priority targets and make sure we are always firing downrange with our weapon, because that's not only going to help increase our damage through the bullet or weapon damage, but it's also going to keep all our buffs running at all times. Now, as for specialization, we are going to be using the technician specialization just for that extra skill tier that lets us put a little more damage into our build, since we're going to be using the capacitor, and lets us put like an extra weapon core, or we can put a little armored core if you feel like you're a little too squishy. As well, we get that extra skill damage as well as all the extra weapon damage and being immune to EMPs if we stand close enough to our turret. Now, as for our weapons, we will be using the capacitor almost 100% of the time, and if you didn't know, this has such an amazing talent and completely makes in sync irrelevant when we are using this. Every time we shoot an enemy, we get a stack, and every stack gives us 1.5% skill damage going up to 40, and now we're going to end up getting about 60% skill damage, and for each skill tier we're going to get 7.5% weapon damage. Although this gun doesn't work good for red builds, it honestly adds a lot of damage for those skill builds if we are using our weapon most of the time. And with this build, we are going to be using it all the time. The only thing is these stacks will slowly decay, but honestly, you're going to have no problem keeping them up from going pack to pack. As long as you are putting damage down range, you will have no issue with this weapon at all. Now, for our secondary weapons, we have a couple of choices. Depending if I know I'm going to run out of ammo a lot, I will switch over to the Harmony just so I can keep at least 40% skill damage and 40% weapon damage going. And if I know I'm not really worried about ever running out of ammo, I'll switch over to the mechanical animal or anything with future perfection just so I can overcharge myself. Although when you switch, you are going to lose that capacitor buff, but it's going to give you an extra 55% skill damage for both turrets, so you'll be able to ramp it up very quickly. Just use it as, let's say, an opener, or if you want to go into a little quick burst phase, just make sure you down that enemy, otherwise that future perfection won't go active. But if you're just looking for something that you don't have to worry about that, just use the Harmony, because you do tend to run out of ammo pretty quick with the capacitor because you really don't ever stop shooting it. Alright, for our other exotic, we are going to be using the waveform. You get this from the season pass when you hit 90 or 80 or 90, I believe. Now, if you haven't finished your season pass yet, you can always switch this out for a Wyvern, because you get that 10% skill damage and you get the 10% from your brand set bonus. But if you have this, definitely use this. Try to get it as high as skill damage. Skill haste does not matter in this build, and we're not going to be using it at all unless we just can't find something to re-roll with. Now, as for the talent alternating current, the way it works, every second you generate a stack of 3% skill damage on one of your skills. Usually start on the left hand skill and it will cap up to 10 stacks. After that, it will stay at 30% skill damage for 10 seconds, at which point it will start to lose 3%, and that 3% will go over to your other skill until it gets to 30% skill damage. Since we are just going to be using turrets, we don't have to worry about managing our skills, when to pop it and when not to. One skill is going to do more damage than the other, and then it will rotate over and over again. So it's just kind of a passive extra skill damage that you don't really have to worry about. Now, as for the rest of the gear, we're going to be running 2 Hana U pieces, mostly for that extra skill damage. Like I said, the skill haste does not really matter. We just want to try to get at least max skill damage or very close, and the other stat is going to be critical hit chance or critical hit damage. Now, if you've already hit your critical hit chance cap, I wouldn't even go to it. I would sit at like 50% and you'll be fine, and put the rest into critical hit damage. Like I said, skill haste does not matter for turrets at all. You're not going to have an issue with cooldowns at all, and if you are, just stagger them about 15-20 seconds. Now, as for the backpack talent, we are going to be using the named Hannah Yu, the force multiplier, and it comes with the talent Perfect Combined Arms. Shooting an enemy increases total skill damage by 30% for 3 seconds. Now, you do not have to use this backpack if you do not have a named one. I would honestly pick up tech support. I just couldn't get a good Hannah Yu backpack with tech support with great skill damage and critical hit chance or critical hit damage. And the thing about Perfect Combined Arms and why I don't like it is because there's moments where you just can't keep damage up every 3 seconds. Maybe someone's behind cover. Maybe it's just sometimes the missions or the way it's set up is a weird layout, and if you push, you might end up getting yourself killed. So I always suggest go with tech support because you're always going to have that up. Your skills are always going to be doing damage and doing kills. Although you'll have a little less skill damage, honestly, overall, I think you're going to be doing much more damage. Now, for our other pieces of gear, we're going to be using the 3-piece Empress International, and it has a great brand scent bonus. We get that 10% skill damage, and we're going to get another 10% skill damage from skill efficiency, and skill efficiency is going to prove everything in skill, so status effects, skill haste, all that, but we really just care about that extra 10% skill damage, and that's going to be great. Now, the talent we are looking for is Kinetic Momentum, one of the best talents in the game, and this will pretty much be up 100% of the time. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Kinetic Momentum, every time you have an active skill or a skill that's not on cooldown, your stacks of skill damage increased by 1%, and it stacks up to 15 stacks per skill. And generally, we're always going to have our turrets up, or it's not going to really be on cooldown for more than 10 to 15 seconds. So that's going to give us 15% skill damage for each skill, and adds up quite a bit. Like I said, it is very easy to manage. Now, since we're going to have that extra skill tier, you're just going to want to make sure you can re-roll one of your pieces to weapon damage or armor. I would suggest weapon damage, so we just get that extra 15% weapon damage that our capacitor is just going to hit that much harder. Now, as for our stats, like I said, make sure every piece has skill damage on it. Try to get it as close to max as possible. And for the other stat, just get your critical chance up to at least 50%. I'm sitting at 53.8, and then just stack critical hit damage. I'm almost up to 100% critical hit damage, and it is noticeable. Like I said, the skill haste does not matter, and it's not really going to affect your build anyway. Now, when it comes to skills, like I said, we're just going to be using the striker drone turret, and we're going to be using the auto turret that we just set down, and it can do its work. Now, when it comes to mods on that, just anything that is going to increase your damage, just get the highest damage mods you can. All the other ones don't really matter, and they're not really going to play an effect on this build. Now, as for the best tips I can give for this build, honestly, is just make sure you have your skills up all the time and stay at least 5 meters next to your turret that you set down. That's going to make you immune from EMPs, and you're not going to have to worry about any of your skills getting electrocuted and them dropping with the technician skill tier. And the other thing is just make sure you are always shooting down range. Make sure you are always hitting an enemy, or you will notice the damage drop very significantly. If you are unable to keep those 40 stacks up, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And especially if you are using the force multiplier, not having that buff up drastically reduces your damage. Losing 30% skill damage just sucks, and you're just not going to be putting out that much damage. Like I said, if you are having trouble keeping that up, just go ahead and throw on a backpack with tech support. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Stay behind cover, keep shooting with the capacitor, and just keep those turrets going non-stop, and you are going to have no problem cruising through any mission. Now, that's all I have for the build video for you guys today. Now, if you have any questions, tips, go ahead and put them down in the comment section. Just keep it civil. Now, if you're looking for other build videos, tutorials, or Division 2 news, I cover everything for old players to new players and everything in between. And thanks again for watching.